He was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed 8,000 miles from home, when his thumb tapped the tiny camera icon on his phone. It was late where he was, city lights shining through the tall glass window, his suit jacket tossed over a chair, his tie hanging loose around his neck. He only wanted to do what he always did before sleep now. Check the live feed from the house, make sure his little girls were safe, make sure the new nanny was doing her job. The screen loaded, the playroom came into view, the same soft gray walls, the pastel shelves, the two small wheelchairs parked under the window. But what his eyes met in that small glowing rectangle did not make sense. His daughters, 4-year-old twins who doctors said would never stand again, were not in their chairs. They were on their feet. Both of them. Tiny fingers pressed to the edge of the sofa. Legs shaking. Knees bent. A young woman stood in front of them, barefoot on the playmat, her arms open wide, tears running down her face as she whispered something he could not hear. One of the girls lifted her foot just a little, like she was trying to take a step. The other leaned forward with a giggle that carried even through the weak speaker. His heart slammed so hard against his ribs that he thought he might pass out. The billionaire who could close a $100 million deal without blinking felt his phone slip from his hand and bounce on the carpet. Before we go back to how this all started, tap the like button, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Are you on your bed, on a bus, at work, or hiding under a blanket like his girls used to do? Let's continue. 3 years earlier, his life had looked almost perfect from the outside. His name was Lucas Carter, and people loved to say it like it was a brand. Lucas owned towers of glass and steel in 3 countries, streams of code and contracts that made money while he slept, and a house on the hill where the grass looked like it had been painted, not grown. For years, he had chased that success like it was oxygen. Long nights in front of screens, early flights for meetings, always one more deal, one more project, one more reason to stay at the office a little later. But behind all the numbers and headlines, there had been one quiet dream that money could not buy. He and his wife, Megan, had tried for a baby for 5 long years. There were tests, doctors, and whispered prayers in the dark when no one was listening. There were treatments that hurt and months that ended in tears. When the clinic finally called to say the in vitro procedure had worked, Megan had dropped the phone and sobbed on the kitchen floor while Lucas held her and laughed and cried at the same time. When the girls were born, everyone in the hospital joked that Lucas had doubled his blessings in one night. 2 perfect baby girls, soft curls, tiny fingers that curled around his thumb. He used to hold them both at once, one in each arm, and whisper into their hair that he would give them the world. They named one girl Lily and the other one Zoe, simple names for the 2 people who made his big complicated life finally make sense. In those first 3 years, Megan took most of the pictures and videos, always catching the small moments that Lucas missed while he was traveling. Lily trying to stand in her crib, Zoe chasing bubbles in the backyard, twin giggles when they hid under the table during dinner. He told himself that his long hours were for them, that every extra deal meant a safer future. He promised Megan that after 1 more year, he would slow down. He did not know he would never get the chance. It was a rainy Thursday night when everything broke. The sky over the city had turned dark early, heavy clouds hanging low. Megan had called him from outside the community center where the girls had their tiny dance class. He still remembered her laugh when she said, "You should see them in those tiny pink shoes. They think they're on a big stage." He was in another country that night, his laptop open on a long conference table, a team waiting for him to approve a contract. He told her he would video call the girls when he got back to his hotel room, told her to drive safe in the rain. That was the last time he heard her voice. Later he would learn the details from the police in the hospital, but at first all he got was a strange call that shook the ground under him. His own assistant walked into the room, pale, holding a phone out to him like it was a bomb. A doctor spoke on the other end, words cutting through the air in short, sharp pieces. There had been a crash at an intersection. A truck driver had run a red light after drinking. The impact had crushed the front of Megan's car. "I am very sorry, Mr. Carter," the doctor said. "Your wife did not survive. Your daughters are in surgery. Their spines were badly injured." People said later that Lucas did not scream, did not cry, did not even speak. He just sat down very slowly in the nearest chair, pressed the phone to his ear like he was trying to push it into his skull, and stared at nothing. He did not remember the flight home, only hands pushing him toward a plane, lights passing by his face, the steady roar of engines and the feeling that the world had ended somewhere over the ocean. The hospital became his whole world for a while. Hallways that smelled like antiseptic, elevators that hummed softly, the cold plastic chairs where he sat in the same suit for 2 days straight. Machines beeped beside 2 tiny beds where his daughters lay still, their little legs wrapped, tubes and wires running from their bodies to monitors. He watched surgeons walk in and out with tired eyes, watched nurses turn them gently, watched someone tape small drawings from their old preschool on the wall above their beds. When the doctor finally called him into a small room with a frosted glass window, his hands would not stop shaking. A scan of 2 small spines glowed on the wall, a bright white line with dark breaks in the middle. The accident caused severe damage to their spinal cords, the doctor said. He spoke slowly, kindly, but each word felt like a drop of acid on Lucas's skin. They are alive. Their minds are strong. But their legs, it is very unlikely they will be able to walk again. Those words did not fit in Lucas's head at first. These were the same girls who had danced in tiny shoes just hours earlier, who had run across the living room floor, who had climbed into his lap begging for up, daddy when he tried to read emails. Now a stranger in a white coat was telling him that those little legs would never carry them again. He left the room and walked straight to the hospital chapel, a small quiet space with rows of wooden benches and a simple cross on the wall. There was no one else there. For the first time in years, he did not know how to fix something. He sat on his knees on the hard floor and put his hands over his face. If I have to give up every building, every contract, every dollar, he whispered into the empty room, I will. Just let them live. I'll take care of them. I'll be there. I promise. Megan's funeral was held on a gray Tuesday morning. The air was damp, the grass under his shoes soft and cold. People spoke kind words about her smile, her kindness, the way she loved the girls. Lucas heard almost none of it. He only remembered standing by the open grave, staring at the wood of the coffin and thinking that the ground was taking away the one person who had always known how to calm their daughters when they cried. He looked up at the sky, then down at the fresh dirt, and he made another promise in his heart. I will not let our girls suffer more than they already have. I will protect them from everything I can, he thought. It was a promise made from love and fear at the same time, and it would go on to control almost every choice he made next. Life after that turned into a careful schedule of doctors, therapists, and adjustments. The house on the hill changed. Builders came in and turned steps into ramps, widened door frames for wheelchairs, added railings to walls, lowered counters, and shifted furniture. The bright pink beds in the girls' room got new bars on the sides so they could be moved safely. The playroom filled with soft mats, special chairs, and toys designed for therapy. Lucas hired the best physical therapists he could find, people who spoke gently to the girls while showing Lucas charts and plans. They worked hard, moving the girls' legs, helping their tiny bodies learn balance all over again, even if they could not feel much below the waist. The girls learned to move their wheelchairs with their hands, learned how to spin in circles and race down the hallway, learned how to reach for things in new ways. But for all the care and all the money, there were some things Lucas could not fix just by paying another bill. Night, after the therapists left and the nurses went home, the house grew very quiet. The twins would roll into their playroom and one of them would say, "When will mommy come back?" Or, "Will I run again, daddy?" Sometimes they drew pictures of themselves standing on 2 legs, wearing bright dresses, running across a field. Lucas tried to smile and tell them stories, tried to be both father and mother, but his own grief sat on his chest like a stone. He threw himself deeper into work, not because he loved his work more than his girls, but because he was trying to drown the pain in meetings and numbers. He promised himself he would only travel when he had to. Still, the world expected the billionaire to show up, and he often left before sunrise and returned long after they were asleep. Because he could not be there every minute, he decided to bring in more help. Nurses worked day shifts at first, then evening shifts. When the twins grew older and started asking more questions and needed more attention, he added nannies too. The first nanny was kind but nervous. She stayed for 3 weeks and then left, saying she could not handle the pressure of working in a house where every move felt judged. The second nanny was fun and loud. The girls loved her until she forgot to lock one of the wheel brakes and one twin almost rolled down the ramp outside. Lucas caught the wheelchair just in time and felt his heart stop. After that, he did something people later criticized him for, but at the time it felt like the only way he could keep his promise to protect them. He installed cameras in almost every room where the girls spent time. Small, clean cameras went into the corners of the ceilings in the playroom, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway by the elevator that took their chairs upstairs. He called it extra safety. For him, it became a lifeline. He could be in a meeting in another city and still, with one tap on an app, see exactly where his girls were, who was with them, and what they were doing. He watched to make sure nurses washed their hands, watched to make sure nannies buckled the girls into their chairs correctly, watched to make sure no one lost their temper when the twins threw a tantrum. Some staff felt sick being watched all the time and quit. Others learned to live with it. A few tried to act perfect for the camera but showed tired, annoyed faces when they thought no one was looking. Lucas saw all of it, and each time someone failed his trust, he let them go and hired someone new. The list of people who had worked in that house grew longer and longer. The twins, Lily and Zoe, grew smart and sharp through all of this. By 4 years old, they could tell when someone was only smiling with their mouth and not their eyes. They could also tell when their father was there in body but thinking about something else far away. They loved him, but they felt his distance too. Sometimes, when he was gone on a business trip, a nurse would roll their chairs into the playroom, set them up with crayons, and put on a cartoon movie. If the nanny that week was kind, she would sit down and draw with them, ask them questions about their favorite colors, sing songs. If the nanny was only there for the paycheck, she would sit in the kitchen on her phone, only coming in when the girls called loudly. The cameras saw it all, every bright moment and every quiet disappointment. Then, 3 weeks before that late-night hotel scene, a new nanny walked into the Carter house. Her name was Jenna, and she did not look nervous at all when she met the girls. She was in her late 20s in a simple blue dress and white sneakers, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. While Lucas watched from his office upstairs, pretending to be busy with an email, she knelt down on the floor so that her eyes were at the same level as the twins in their wheelchairs. "Hi," she said softly, as if she was speaking to two queens on tiny thrones. "I'm here to learn from you. You're the experts in this house, right?" Lily blinked at her and then laughed. Zoe hid her face in her hands for a moment and then peeked out. They were used to adults who either talked too loudly or too slowly, like the girls could not understand normal words. Jenna did not do that. She spoke to them like they were smart, like they were whole. For the first week, Lucas kept an extra close eye on the cameras whenever he could. He watched Jenna move the girls gently from their chairs to the playmat, always following the rules the therapist had written out. He watched her sing silly songs when one of them refused to eat, watched her push their chairs out on the balcony so they could feel the wind on their faces, watched her patiently help them pick up markers they dropped. When one twin cried because she had seen another child running outside and said, "I will never do that," Lucas saw how Jenna's face softened. She did not rush to say, "Don't say that," or, "It will be fine." Instead, she sat down beside her, looked at her directly and said, "I do not know what tomorrow will be like. But I know your body is still learning. And I know I will not give up on you. So don't you dare give up on yourself." Lucas felt something strange in his chest when he heard that through the speaker. Hope was a feeling he had tried not to touch for a long time because it hurt when it broke. The twins seemed to change slightly in those first days with Jenna. They still used their wheelchairs, still went to therapy, still had days when they were tired and cranky, but there was more laughter in the playroom. One afternoon, while Lucas watched from his office, Jenna set up a small music speaker and turned on a song with a strong beat. She helped the girls sit on the edge of a low bench, their feet touching the mat. "We're going to teach your legs to dance in a new way," she said. She held their knees and moved their legs in time with the music, letting them watch themselves in a mirror she had brought in. "Your legs are not useless," she told them. "They're just sleepy. We will wake them up together." He saw the girls stare at their own reflections, saw their fingers tighten on the edge of the bench. Something had shifted, but he was still afraid to name it. Still, doubt stayed in his mind. He had heard promises before. Therapists had said words like improvement and possibility, but they always came with big warning labels, long explanations about what was medically realistic. He did not want to be the foolish father who believed in miracles and then had to watch his daughters cry when things did not change. So he did what he always did. He watched. He watched Jenna stay late to stretch their legs a little longer. He watched her read articles on her phone about creative exercises for children with spinal injuries. He watched her close the curtains and turn off some of the lights when the girls were tired, making the playroom feel like a safe little cave. He noticed that she did something that no other nanny had done before. When the girls failed at something, when they lost balance and fell back onto the mat, she did not rush to say, "Careful," in a panicked voice. She laughed softly and said, "That was brave. Try again when you are ready." 2 weeks later, a big deal pulled Lucas out of the country again. This time, instead of feeling only dread about leaving, he felt something else too. Relief that Jenna would be there with the girls. Before he left, he sat her down at the kitchen table and went over all the rules. Medicine schedule. Emergency numbers. Times for therapy. Where the night nurses kept extra supplies. She listened quietly, nodding. When he was done, she said something that made him blink. "You know, you can trust me to care for them," she said. "But you also need to let them surprise you sometimes." He frowned, not quite sure what she meant, then picked up his suitcase and kissed the girls goodbye. They clung to his neck, their small arms tight, their wheels bumping against his legs. "Bring us a snow globe," Lily said. "Bring us candy," Zoe added. He promised he would. The flight was long and the meetings were longer. In the new city, everything felt sharp and bright. Glass towers, fast elevators, and rooms full of people who only cared about the next big number. Lucas slipped back into his old skin, the strong voice in the boardroom, the man behind the deals. But each night, when the meetings were done and the hotel door clicked shut behind him, he took off his tie, sat on the edge of the bed and opened the camera app. Sometimes he saw the girls asleep, curled under their blankets, their wheelchairs parked beside the bed like patient guards. Sometimes he saw Jenna in the kitchen, packing snacks for the next day, or in the playroom arranging toys. Once he saw her sitting on the floor with a notebook, drawing 2 stick figures with little circles for wheels, then scratching them out and drawing the same figures standing up. She stared at the drawing for a long time. He did not know what she was thinking, and that bothered him. On the 3rd week of his trip, late on a Thursday night in his hotel room, he almost forgot to check the app. He was tired, his head heavy, his eyes burning from looking at screens all day. He had just finished a video call with a partner, the kind of call that would have excited him years ago. Now, as he hung up, the glow from the window caught the edge of the picture on his phone, the one of his daughters laughing on his lock screen. A wave of longing washed over him so strong that he had to sit down. With a sigh, he unlocked the phone and tapped the camera app out of habit. The little spinning circle showed up. He waited for the familiar view of the quiet playroom, maybe the night nurse reading on a chair. Instead, the image that appeared made his breath catch in his throat. The playroom lights were on, but dimmer than usual, like someone had turned the switch halfway. Soft music played, just loud enough that his phone picked up the sound as a gentle hum. On the center of the mat, his daughters were not in their wheelchairs. They were not even sitting. They were standing. Both of them. Their small hands were pressed against the edge of the couch, their bare feet flat on the mat, knees shaking. He could see their legs wobble, muscles straining. Jenna stood facing them, one step away, her hands held out like she was ready to catch them but refusing to hold them up. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but there was a fierce smile on her face. "You can do it," her mouth seemed to say, though he could not hear the words clearly. One twin lifted her heel off the mat just a little, then set it back down. The other leaned forward, wobbling, then straightened. It did not look like the random reflexes he had seen in the hospital. It looked like effort, intent, a choice. Lucas's heart hammered so loudly he could hear it over the tiny sound from the phone. Part of his mind screamed that this was dangerous. What if they fell? What if they hurt themselves? What if one wrong move damaged them even more? Another part of him wanted to drop to his knees in that hotel room and weep. He could not move, only stare. Jenna wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a slow breath, and said something else, her lips forming words he desperately wished he could hear. Then she did something that froze his blood. She looked straight up at the camera as if she knew exactly where it was and gave a small, calm nod. After that, she walked toward the corner of the room, reached up, and tapped something on the wall just below the camera. The screen on his phone went black. The hotel room seemed to shrink around him the second the screen went black, like the walls were folding in and the carpet under his feet was tilting. For a heartbeat he just stared at his phone, the reflection of his own stunned face looking back at him from the dark glass. His daughters had been standing. It was not a trick of light, not a camera glitch, not some dream. Their little hands had been pressed against the couch, their legs shaking, their feet on the mat instead of hanging limp from a wheelchair. He had seen the strain in their muscles, the way their shoulders tensed, the wild mix of fear and excitement in their eyes. They were not being held upright by some machine. They were trying. On their own. And then Jenna had looked straight at the camera with that strange calm nod, like she was saying, "I know you're watching," and reached up to press something on the wall. Now there was nothing. No playroom. No girls. No nanny. Just a silent, black square on his phone where his entire world lived. Panic rushed through him so fast it made his fingers numb. He jabbed at the screen, switching between camera feeds, hoping it was just that room. The hallway camera still worked, empty beige walls, a table with a vase of fake flowers, the soft blur of the night nurse walking past. The kitchen camera lit up too, showing clean countertops and a row of neatly stacked dishes. The feed outside their bedroom door was on, the little green light in the corner blinking. Every camera in the house worked except the one he needed the most. The playroom feed stayed black, like someone had closed a curtain in front of his eyes. Anger surged up inside him, mixing with fear. Nobody turned off his cameras. He paid for safety, for control. That playroom camera was not just a device. It was the only way he could breathe when he was far away. Now someone had reached right through that line and cut it. His first wild thought was that something terrible had happened and Jenna had shut the camera off to hide it. Maybe the girls had fallen. Maybe one of them had hit her head. Maybe Jenna had done something reckless and now was trying to keep him from seeing it. His heart pounded so hard his vision blurred for a moment. He could not think, only move. He grabbed the hotel phone and his own phone at the same time, almost knocking over the lamp on the nightstand. With clumsy fingers he hit the speed dial for his house security team on his mobile while stabbing at the hotel phone keypad to reach the front desk. The hotel receptionist answered first, her voice smooth and polite. "Mr. Carter, is everything okay?" He barely heard her. "I need a car to the airport," he said, his voice coming out rough and sharp. "No. Not in 20 minutes. Now." On the second ring, the head of his security, a calm older man named Grant, picked up. "Sir," he said. His voice had that clipped tone of someone who had already been awake, already watching. "What's wrong?" Lucas did not waste time on greetings. "The playroom camera just went dark," he snapped. "I want you to go there now. Not in 5 minutes. No. Open the door. Look at my girls. Put me on video so I can see them. And find out who turned off that camera." He could hear movement on the other end, the sound of keys and footsteps, the quick bark of orders as Grant spoke to someone else in the background. "I'm on my way," he said. "Stay on the line, sir." Lucas shoved his feet into his shoes without socks, grabbed his jacket with one hand and his suitcase with the other, and rushed out of the room. The brightly lit hotel hallway felt wrong, too calm, too quiet. As he passed other doors, he wondered how many people were sleeping peacefully behind them, unaware that somewhere across the world, 2 little girls might be lying on a playroom floor with no one to help them. The elevator seemed to crawl. He stabbed the button again and again as if that would make it move faster. His phone was pressed to his ear the whole time, his other hand shaking so hard his suitcase wheels rattled against the floor. He heard Grant's breathing grow louder over the phone as he ran through the big house, up the private elevator, down the long hallway that led to the playroom. "I'm outside the door now," Grant said, slightly out of breath. "I'm switching you to video." The call flickered, and suddenly Lucas could see a live image from Grant's phone camera. The playroom door, white with a little painted rainbow the twins had chosen, stood closed in front of him. For a second, fear made Lucas want to shout, "Don't open it!" as if whatever horror waited inside would stay frozen if the door stayed shut. Instead, he swallowed hard and forced out, "Go in." Grant pushed the door open. The playroom came into view, exactly the way it had looked on the camera earlier, except now the lights were brighter. Soft gray walls, shelves full of toys, the colorful mat in the middle of the floor. 2 tiny wheelchairs stood near the window, but they were empty. The couch where the girls had been bracing themselves was there, cushions slightly pushed out of place. The little mirror Jenna had brought in leaned against the wall. For one strange heartbeat, the room looked like a stage after a play, everything set but no actors in sight. "Where are they?" Lucas demanded, his voice sharp and too loud in his own ear. "Grant, where are my girls?" Grant stepped into the room, his phone camera sweeping slowly from side to side. "They're not here," he said, confusion tightening his voice. "Hold on." He walked toward the hallway door, pushed it open, checked the hallway, then came back. "They didn't pass me on the way up," he added. "No nurse brought them past. Maybe they're—" He cut himself off as if he did not want to finish a sentence that started with, "Maybe they're not in the house." Lucas felt a cold wave wash over him. Kidnapping. The thought slammed into him like a punch. He had enemies. Not the kind who fought with fists, but the kind who used lawyers and rumors and sometimes things much darker. People who would love to hurt him by hurting the 2 small people he loved most. He had always thought about it in a distant way, something security handled with high fences and alarm systems and background checks. Now for the first time he felt that fear as something real, a set of claws closing around his chest. "Check every room," he said hoarsely. "And check the back entrances. Call the gate. No one leaves. No one comes in. And find Jenna." As Grant started moving again, the camera view bounced, catching quick flashes of the hallway, the elevator, the guest rooms. Over the next few minutes, other guards joined the search, their voices overlapping through the phone. "North wing clear. No sign in the garden. Garage secure." Security footage from the gates showed no unknown cars, no vans, no strangers coming or going. The girls had not left the house. They had to be somewhere inside. That thought calmed him just a little, enough for his brain to latch onto another detail. The last thing he had seen before the camera went black was not someone snatching his daughters. It was Jenna nodding at the camera and then pressing something near it. She had not looked scared. She had looked steady. Almost sure. "Have someone check the playroom camera, the actual device," he said, forcing his voice to slow down. "See if it was turned off from inside or if there's a technical issue. Within seconds, one of the younger tech guys in the security team appeared in the frame, climbing up on a small ladder in the playroom. He reached up near the corner where the camera was and said, "Sir, the power cable was unplugged. It wasn't a system error. Someone switched it off from the wall." Lucas gritted his teeth. "Then someone wanted privacy," he muttered. He hated that word when it came to his girls. Everybody else in the world could have privacy. His daughters had already lost too much. He refused to let them lose safety too. "Found them," another voice called out in the background. "Family room." The camera on Grant's phone swung sharply as he turned and hurried down the hall. Lucas's heart leaped into his throat. The family room was on the other side of the floor, a space that looked more like a giant cozy nest than a formal room. When the door opened, the sight that came into view knocked the breath out of him. The twins were there, curled up on the big L-shaped couch, sound asleep. One girl's head rested on the other's shoulder, their legs covered with a soft blanket. Their wheelchairs were parked nearby. Jenna sat on the floor beside them, her back against the couch, her knees drawn up. Her head had fallen sideways, her cheek pressed to her shoulder in the heavy, crooked way of someone who had been too tired to move to a proper bed. A children's book lay open on the floor in front of her, and a music player on the table glowed faintly. Relief hit Lucas so hard it made his eyes sting. He almost dropped his phone again, this time not from shock but from the sudden letting go of terror. They were alive. They were okay. No blood, no ambulances, no strangers. Just his daughters, sleeping under a blanket with their hair still a little messy from whatever had happened in the playroom before. "Zoom in," he whispered as if he was in a theater and did not want to wake them. Grant moved closer. The camera view showed the twins' faces, relaxed and peaceful, tiny eyelashes resting on soft cheeks. Their legs were tucked under the blanket, and Lucas could not see if there was anything different about them. Then the view shifted to Jenna. In sleep, her face looked younger, but there were dark shadows under her eyes, and her hair was slightly damp at the hairline, like she had been crying or sweating, or both. Her hand rested near one of the girl's arms, as if she had been holding it before they all dozed off. "Wake her," Lucas said quietly. "But don't scare the girls." Grant touched Jenna's shoulder gently. Her eyes flew open, confusion flashing across her face as she took in the security guard in front of her and the phone pointed toward her like a little spotlight. She blinked twice, then sat up straighter. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice a little hoarse from sleep. Lucas did not bother with being gentle. "Why did you unplug the playroom camera?" he demanded through the phone. Her eyes flicked to the screen, and for a moment, he saw the same calm he had seen when she looked up at the camera earlier. "Mr. Carter," she said slowly, not cowed by his sharp tone. "Can we talk about this in private? I don't want to wake the girls." That answer made his temper flare again. He was used to people scrambling when he raised his voice, not asking for terms. "You had no right to cut off my view of my own kids," he snapped. "What were you doing in that room that you didn't want me to see?" Jenna took a deep breath, then carefully stood up, her movements stiff like her muscles were sore. She gestured for Grant to step out into the hallway. Once the door was closed behind them and the twins were out of earshot, she looked straight into the phone camera. "You did see," she said quietly. "You saw more than you were supposed to." Lucas froze. "What is that supposed to mean?" he shot back. "I saw my daughters standing when every doctor has told me for 3 years that they never would. I saw you letting them do something dangerous without telling me. And then you shut off the camera." Instead of shrinking back, Jenna tilted her head slightly, studying his face on the tiny screen like she was trying to decide how much truth he could handle. "Nothing happened to them that I wasn't willing to put my own body on the line for," she said. "I was right there. I've been right there every day. And I unplugged the camera because for the first time since I came into this house, your daughters forgot they were on a screen. They forgot they were being watched and judged. They were just trying." Her voice shook a little on the last word, not from fear but from emotion. Lucas opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. A hotel staff member appeared at his elbow, murmuring that the car was ready. He waved the man away without taking his eyes off the phone. "Trying can get them hurt," he said. "Trying can make things worse. Those doctors," she cut him off softly. "Those doctors saw them at their worst moment, right after the accident. They saw charts and scans and numbers. I see them every day in real time. I see how they move when they are playing, how they shift in their sleep, how their legs twitch when they get excited or scared. I'm not here to perform magic, Mr. Carter. I'm here to give their bodies a chance to do what they're secretly begging to do." Words like chance and secretly begging made him think of the drawings he'd seen her make in the playroom, little stick figures crossing out wheelchairs. He did not like it. Hope felt like a sharp object in his hands. "You had no permission to run experiments on my kids," he said coldly. "You work for me. You follow my rules." Jenna's jaw tightened. For the first time, a flash of frustration burned in her eyes. "I work for them," she said quietly. "You sign my paycheck, but they are the reason I'm here. I know you're scared. I know you've seen more bad news than good news. But if you only wrap them in bubble wrap and watch them through a screen, they will never know how strong they really are." Before he could respond, one of the twins started crying in the other room, a soft, panicked sound. Jenna's head whipped around and she turned away from the camera without waiting for permission, pushing the door open and going back to them. The last thing Lucas saw before the call shifted was her leaning over the couch, murmuring something soothing as she brushed a tear off a small cheek. The image blurred as Grant lowered the phone. "Sir," he said, "the girls are fine. The house is secure. Do you still want us to hold Jenna?" The question hung heavy in the air. Lucas hesitated. His first instinct was to fire her on the spot, to tell security to lock her out of every room, to make her feel the same sharp cut he had felt when the camera went black. But another part of him, a quieter, more dangerous part, whispered that if he removed her before getting answers, he might be tearing away the only person who had just made the impossible happen. He had seen his girls standing. That image was carved into his mind now. "No," he said slowly. "Don't fire her. Not yet. Keep the cameras on. No more unplugging. I'll be home tomorrow. Tell her we will talk then." He hung up before Grant could say more and almost ran to the waiting car. The drive to the airport was a blur of shiny streets and red brake lights, his thoughts looping like a broken record. They stood. They stood. They stood. Every time the memory of their trembling legs came back, his throat tightened. On the plane, as soon as he boarded, the flight attendant recognized him and asked if he needed anything special. "Just privacy," he muttered, sinking into his seat. He did not open his laptop. He did not review contracts. He opened the camera app again and again, watching his daughters sleep, wake, eat breakfast with a nurse helping them, play with blocks while Jenna sat nearby, her face tired but focused. She did not go near the camera again. She did not turn off any switches. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the house was pretending nothing had happened. Halfway through the long flight, when most of the other passengers were asleep and the cabin lights were dim, he found himself replaying old memories without meaning to. The way Megan had spun Lily around the kitchen, those tiny legs kicking back in the air. The time Zoe had run down the hallway in mismatched socks, chasing bubbles, her laughter echoing off the walls. The night in the hospital when a physical therapist had said, "We can't promise walking, but we can promise mobility. With therapy they can have rich lives even in chairs." He remembered nodding, pretending to understand while a part of his mind simply shut down. He had carried that closed door inside him ever since, choosing to focus on what he could control. Ramps, railings, special schools, caregivers. Not on what he couldn't, spines that would not heal, nerves that would not carry messages. And now a nanny who had been in his house for just 3 weeks had kicked that door open without permission. He tried to find rational explanations. Maybe what he had seen was some kind of reflex. Maybe Jenna had positioned them in a way that made it look like they were carrying more of their own weight than they were. Maybe he had imagined the tiny lift of a heel because he wanted to see it so badly. But every time he reached for doubt, the memory of her looking up at the camera and nodding knocked it away. She had not looked guilty. She had looked like someone telling him, silently, "This is real. Believe it." That angered him almost more than if she had looked scared. Who was she to ask him to believe in anything after all the doctors had taught him to expect the worst? As the plane began its descent hours later, the sky outside the window turning from dark to a soft blue-gray, he realized something else that made his stomach twist. He knew almost nothing about Jenna. Sure, his team had done the standard checks. No criminal record, good references from previous jobs, a nursing background, some volunteer work at a rehab center. She had filled out the forms, passed the interviews, smiled politely at the board of therapists who quizzed her about spine injuries and safe lifting. But beyond that, she was just a name in a file. He did not know why she'd chosen this work, or what ghost she might be carrying. He did not know what drove that fierce look in her eyes when she told his daughter not to give up on herself. For a man who liked to know every angle, every risk, that ignorance felt dangerous. By the time the car from the airport pulled up to the big iron gates of his house, the early morning sun was just brushing the tops of the trees. The guard waved him through quickly, already warned of his return. The driveway stretched ahead like a quiet tunnel framed by perfectly trimmed hedges and polished stone. The house itself, with its wide windows and high roof, had never looked more like both a castle and a cage. He stepped out of the car before it fully stopped, not waiting for the driver to open his door, and walked up the steps with long, hard strides. The front door swung open and the house manager appeared, flustered. "Welcome home, sir," he began. "We weren't expecting." "Where are they?" Lucas cut in. "Playroom? Bedroom?" The manager swallowed. "They're with Jenna in the therapy room right now," he said. "The morning session started an hour ago. The therapist gave her a plan to follow while they come 3 days a week and Lucas did not wait to hear more. He took the elevator up, his reflection flickering in the mirrored walls. He had meant to call the head therapist before coming, to ask if there was any known chance of improvement at this late stage, any secret study, any special method someone like Jenna might have learned. But he had been too busy replaying that one image of little feet on the mat. Now the only thing he could think about was seeing it with his own eyes. Without a camera between them. Without distance. The therapy room was on the second floor, a space with big windows and padded floors, mirrors on one wall and various equipment lined up like strange toys from another world. Parallel bars, balance balls, supportive harnesses. When he reached the door he paused, his hand on the handle. Voices drifted through the crack, soft and steady. He heard one of the twins giggle, then a small grunt of effort, then Jenna's voice, low and encouraging. "That's it, slow, don't rush. Feel what your feet are doing. I've got you." There was no panic in her tone, only focus. For a moment he felt like an intruder listening in on something too private, like someone eavesdropping on a prayer. He pushed the door open anyway. The sight that met him stopped him cold on the threshold. Lily and Zoe were in the middle of the room, not in their wheelchairs. Instead, they were strapped into a special standing frame device that he recognized from their therapy days at the hospital. Only this one had been adjusted in a way he had not seen before. Jenna stood in front of them, her hands lightly on the frame, her knees bent as if ready to catch them. The girls' feet were flat on the padded mat, their legs slightly supported by the frame but not fully held. Their arms gripped the bars on either side. Sweat glistened on their little foreheads, and their faces were a mix of effort and wild, bright excitement. For a split second he just stood there, his heart banging against his ribs, afraid to move in case he broke the spell. Then Zoe spotted him. Her eyes widened and a smile exploded across her face. "Daddy," she cried. Her body jerked with the excitement, and one of her feet slid forward just a few inches, but far enough that Jenna's hand flew to the frame to steady it. Lily gasped at the same time, her own foot quivering as if wanting to join in. The room seemed to tilt. They were not just standing. They were trying to step. Everything in him screamed to run forward and grab them, to lift them up into his arms, to shout for everyone to stop before someone got hurt. Another part of him, softer and more scared, whispered, "Watch. Don't stop it this time." He stood frozen in the doorway, torn between those two urges, while Jenna slowly turned her head toward him. Their eyes met. She did not look guilty now. She looked both exhausted and quietly fierce, like someone who had been fighting a long, secret battle and was finally ready to show the general what his soldiers could do. "Good timing," she said softly. "They were just about to show you something." Before he could answer, before he could decide whether to step in or step back, Lily's hand slipped on the bar. Her small body pitched forward, the frame creaking. Zoe cried out her sister's name. Jenna lunged. For one terrifying heartbeat, it looked like everyone in that room was going to crash to the floor together in a tangle of limbs and metal. And then, Jenna did not hit the floor the way his fear told him she would, and neither did the girls. At the last second she twisted her body, taking most of the weight on her own knees and shoulder, her arms stretched across the frame so that the metal caught and held instead of toppling, and Lily's chest bumped the padded bar instead of the ground while Zoe's foot slid but stayed under her, and there was this sharp little gasp of air from all three of them at once as the device rocked, squeaked, and then went still again, the room frozen like a paused video while Lucas stood in the doorway with his heart punching against his ribs so hard it almost hurt. For a moment no one moved, then Lily gave a tiny whimper that punched straight through him, and Jenna, still half crouched, pressed her forehead to the side of the frame and let out a shaky laugh that sounded one breath away from a sob, whispering, you're okay, that was brave, that was so brave," as her hands checked small arms and legs with practiced speed to make sure nothing had twisted the wrong way. Then she lifted her eyes to him again, breathless, and said, "This is what it looks like when they fight to do what everyone said they can't." And something in her tone made it clear that she was not apologizing. The spell broke. He crossed the room in 4 strides, his shoes loud on the padded floor, one hand catching the frame as if his grip could make it more solid, the other hovering uselessly near Lily's shoulder, wanting to hold her and also not wanting to jolt her, his voice coming out sharper than he intended as he barked. That could have gone very wrong, but underneath the harshness was something else, something wild and shaking, because while he scolded he could not unsee the fact that his daughter's legs, the same little legs doctors had all but written off, were still bearing part of her weight even now, muscles quivering but engaged, toes pressed against the mat instead of hanging limp, her body leaning into the bar with a kind of stubborn determination that looked so much like Megan in the last months of fertility treatments that he almost lost his breath. Lily turned her head toward him, cheeks flushed, hair stuck to her forehead, eyes big and shining, and said in a tiny, breathless voice, "Daddy, I almost did it," like she was admitting to touching magic. Zoe nodded fiercely beside her, her own cheeks wet and streaked with tears he could not tell were from fear or excitement, maybe both, and she whispered, "We were standing like big kids." And in that moment Lucas felt something shift inside him, like a gear that had been stuck for years. Finally grinding forward, he wanted to scoop them both up, pull them away from everything and promise they would never have to strain like that again, never have to risk falling, but he also knew that if he did that right now, if he rushed in as the protector who removed all danger, he would be the one slamming the door on whatever small miracle had just started. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt as he forced himself to breathe and speak slowly. "We're taking them out of this thing now," he said, voice rough but controlled. "Slowly. Carefully." Jenna nodded, not arguing, her own shoulders dropping a tiny bit in relief. She moved around to the side, showing him exactly how she supported their hips and unbuckled the straps without letting their weight collapse, whispering gentle instructions to the girls the whole time. "Bend your knees a little, there you go, trust the mat, I've got you," until they were both settled on the floor, sitting with their backs against the frame, legs stretched out in front of them on the padding. As soon as they were out, Lucas dropped to his knees on the mat, his expensive pants picking up foam dust he did not care about, and pulled both girls into his arms, folding them against his chest so tightly he felt their little ribs move with his own ragged breaths. They clung to him, tiny hands grabbing at his shirt, their bodies still trembling from effort, and for a few seconds none of them spoke, the only sounds in the room the thud of his heart and the small hiccuping breaths of his daughters. Over Jenna's shoulder he saw the mirror on the wall, and for half a heartbeat he did not recognize the man reflected there. Hair mussed from the plane, tie askew, eyes red and too bright, arms wrapped around two small bodies who had just done something every chart in their medical file said would not happen. Behind him, Jenna stayed very still, hands at her sides as if she knew this moment belonged to them and not to her. When he finally pulled back enough to see the girls' faces, he tried to smile but his mouth shook. "You scared me," he said, his voice soft now, not angry, just honest. "You scared me more than any business deal ever has." Zoe gave a tiny tired giggle at that, leaning her cheek against his shoulder. "We scared ourselves too," she admitted, and then with the blunt honesty of a 4-year-old added, "But my legs felt like they were talking." Lily nodded, very serious. "Mine too," she whispered. "They felt like they were waking up from a nap." Jenna said, "They're not broken, just sleepy." Lucas's gaze flicked up to the nanny at that, a complicated mix of gratitude and irritation knotting in his stomach. He understood why she would say that to motivate them, but he also heard the echo of doctors telling him not to promise things he could not guarantee. He gently smoothed hair out of Lily's face and said, "Your legs are special, and we have to be very careful with them," carefully choosing words that did not crush the spark he could see in their eyes. Then he looked up fully at Jenna, his expression sharpening. "We are going to talk," he said quietly but firmly. "In my office. After they rest." Jenna did not flinch from his gaze. She only nodded. "They should eat and nap," she said, that practical calm back in her tone. "After what they just did, their muscles and their minds will be tired. Too much excitement can make their bodies lock up or spasm later." There was no arrogance in her words, just the matter-of-fact knowledge of someone who had seen this kind of effort before. She moved smoothly into helper mode, fetching their wheelchairs, arranging the little footrests, lifting each girl with efficient, practiced motions, all the while talking to them in a low, soothing voice about snacks and storybooks and how proud she was of their courage. The twins beamed at her, tired but glowing, and Lucas caught how Lily's hand brushed against Jenna's wrist in a quick, affectionate squeeze when she thought no one was looking. It hit him then that in the weeks he had been away, these three had built something real together. Trust, routines, small rituals of courage, and he was arriving in the middle of a story that had not been written by him. That burned his pride a little, even as it softened something in his chest. Once the girls were settled in their chairs, he insisted on wheeling them himself down the hall to their room, Jenna walking beside him like a quiet shadow. He listened as the twins chattered over each other, retelling the same moment he had just witnessed as if it were a scene from a cartoon they loved. "I almost fell but didn't," My toes felt like ants, Daddy, funny ants. Jenna said I was a warrior. They gushed, their voices climbing higher with each detail. He smiled and nodded in all the right places, but inside his mind was racing. Warrior. Sleepy legs. Standing like big kids. Dangerous words, maybe, but also words that lit up their faces in a way he had not seen since before the accident. When he tucked them into bed a little later, after juice and a small meal and 1,000 kisses on their foreheads, they drifted off faster than usual, their bodies worn out in a good way instead of just from emotional heaviness. He sat in the chair beside their beds for a long time, watching their chests rise and fall, his thoughts running in circles. He thought about Megan and the way she used to argue with doctors when they tried to talk in terms of statistics instead of people. You talk like they're numbers on a chart, she had snapped at one specialist once, her eyes flashing. They are our children. He thought about the day of the accident, the cold white of the hospital walls, the numbness that had settled in his bones when the doctor had said, "Never walk again," and how he had decided in that moment that he would accept that verdict because it was the only way to function. If he let himself hope for more than what science said was possible, he was sure it would destroy him when it did not happen. Better to build a fortress of acceptance and fill it with ramps and equipment and the best care money could buy than to keep running at a closed door. But now there was a crack in that door, and it had been made not by some famous surgeon, but by a young woman who made sandwiches for them in the kitchen and read them bedtime stories. By the time he asked the house manager to send Jenna to his office, he had cycled through anger, fear, curiosity, and something that felt uncomfortably like fragile hope. His office was his safe place, a room of dark wood, books, and wide windows, the walls lined with framed deals and awards that had once mattered more to him than anything. Tonight they looked strangely small. When Jenna stepped inside, she did not hover near the door like many employees did. She walked in, closed it gently behind her, and stood straight with her hands loosely clasped in front of her, waiting. She had changed out of the blue dress into a plain gray t-shirt and soft black pants, and there was a smudge of something on her sleeve, marker or food or maybe just the day itself. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and there was a faint red mark on one knee where she had caught herself on the mat. For a moment they just looked at each other, the billionaire and the nanny, two people from very different worlds who had both just watched the same impossible thing. Lucas broke the silence first. "You put my daughters in a standing frame without telling me," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "You unplugged one of my cameras without permission. You let them push their bodies to the point where they almost fell. You let the list hang in the air. Why?" Jenna did not rush to answer. She took a slow breath, like she was steadying herself on the inside the way she had steadied the frame earlier. "Because if I had asked first, you would have said no," she replied. "And because every day I watch them want to do more than people let them try." He felt heat rise in his chest. "You don't get to decide what I would say," he snapped. "You have been here for 3 weeks. I have been living this reality for 3 years. I have talked to every specialist, paid for every therapy, sat through every prognosis. I know what is at stake." She nodded, accepting his anger without flinching. "You know the worst-case scenarios very well," she said softly. "You know how to protect them from falls and infections and bad nurses. You know how to build ramps and buy equipment. But you do not know what their bodies can do now, today, because you are still afraid of the worst thing that already happened." The words hit him like a slap, not because they were cruel, they weren't, but because they cut so close to a truth he did not want to see. He opened his mouth to tell her she was out of line, that she had no right to psychoanalyze him, but she kept going, her voice steady but her fingers twisting together for the first time. "I know you think I'm some stranger playing with hope," she said. "So let me tell you something I did not put on the job form. When I was 16, I walked out of a party with my little brother. A drunk driver ran a stop sign. He was in the back seat. His spine took most of the impact. They told my parents he would never stand. We lived in a small town. We did not have your money. We had one tired doctor and a physical therapist who came twice a week. For 6 months, my brother lay in that bed while people whispered over him. Then one day the therapist went on vacation and my brother whispered to me, 'Can we try something different before she comes back and says I can't?' Her eyes were far away now, looking at a memory instead of at him. So we did," she continued. "We emptied the living room, used kitchen chairs and belts to make a standing frame, watched videos of other kids trying new things. We failed a lot. He fell on me more than once. We cried. We laughed. We tried again. And slowly, his muscles started to fire in ways the doctor had not expected. He never became a runner. He still uses a wheelchair most of the time. But he can stand to hug someone. He can take a few steps with support to get from his chair to the couch. The doctor calls it a miracle. I call it stubborn love and a body that no one fully understood yet. A long silence settled after her words, thick enough to touch. Lucas stared at her, trying to picture a younger version of her holding up a boy who had been told not to hope. So you thought you could recreate that here? He finally asked, his tone tinged with both sarcasm and something like awe. You thought my daughters would just copy your brother? Jenna shook her head. No, she said. I thought your daughters deserved someone who believed their bodies might have more to say than a 3-year-old MRI. I talked to their therapist. I did not go rogue completely. The equipment we used is safe. The risk of a fall is there, yes, but so is the risk of their muscles getting weaker from never being challenged. I unplugged the camera because they kept glancing up at it, watching themselves instead of feeling what was happening. They already live with so many eyes on them, nurses, teachers, even you through the screen. I wanted them to have one moment where they were not performing for anyone. Of course, the irony is that you saw anyway. He remembered how the girls had looked just before she turned off the feed, focused, unsure, but lit from within by something fierce. He also remembered the blind panic of that black screen. You stole my choice, he said, but the sting had less venom now, more weary pain. You decided what kind of father I would be in that moment, and you did not trust me to see what you see. Jenna's shoulders slumped a little. For the first time since she entered the room, she looked unsure. Maybe I did, she admitted. Every time I see you watching them through your phone instead of from the doorway, I think, he needs distance to feel safe. I was wrong not to give you the chance to choose to be closer. I'm sorry for that. But I am not sorry for showing them what their legs can do. Another silence stretched. Somewhere down the hall, a clock chimed the hour. Lucas stared out the window toward the garden, thinking of the little playground he had built there that the girls could not use the way he had imagined when he designed it. 4 years, he had accepted a version of their future that, while full and loving, did not include certain physical possibilities. It had hurt less to lower the bar than to keep crashing into it. Now here was this woman, young enough to be one of his junior managers, quietly raising it again without his permission. It infuriated and terrified him. It also made him feel something he had not felt in a long time, like perhaps, just perhaps, the story was not as finished as he had believed. Tomorrow, he said at last, turning back to her, we are calling their lead doctor and their main therapist. We are telling them exactly what happened. We are asking what is medically happening, if anything. I will not move forward based only on your story about your brother, no matter how moving it is. He saw a flicker of hurt cross her face at that word, but she nodded. That is fair, she said simply. I have never wanted to replace their doctors. I just want them to see what I see. He studied her a moment longer. Until then, he added, you will not unplug any cameras. You will not try anything new without telling me. You will not put them in that frame alone. If we do this again, I am there. Understood. Understood, she replied, a hint of relief in her voice, like she had gotten more than she dared hope for. After she left, closing the office door behind her with a soft click, Lucas sank back in his chair and let his head fall into his hands. He felt wrung out, like someone had taken his heart, stretched it, and then handed it back in a different shape. He thought of the way the girls had described their legs, talking, waking up, and wondered what kind of messages had been trying to reach them all along that nobody had listened for. He thought of Jenna's brother and of Megan's stubbornness and of his own fear that had been disguised as calm practicality. Then he did something he had not done since the early days in the hospital. He opened his laptop, not to answer emails, but to type in a search for late improvements in spinal cord injuries in children, for neuroplasticity, for stories that did not end where the textbooks had decided they should. The more he read, the more tangled his thoughts became. There were scientific words about pathways and signals, cautious phrases about unexpected gains in function, and as many warnings about false hope as there were glimmers of possibility. He closed the device before he drowned in it, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. The next day, the doctor who had been with them since the early days came to the house, his kind face creased with surprise at the urgent call. The girls were thrilled to see him, chattering loudly as he measured their legs, tested reflexes, asked them to wiggle toes and push against his hands. Usually these visits were slow, almost boring, the same tests repeated with the same results. This time, something was different. When he asked Lily to try to push his hand with her foot, the movement that answered him was tiny, barely more than a twitch, but it was there, and when he asked again, it came a little quicker, as if her body was remembering which path to take. Zoe managed to hold her leg in the air for a second longer than her last recorded attempt. The doctor's eyebrows climbed his forehead as he scribbled notes and frowned at his own data. Have you changed anything in their routine? he asked, glancing up at Lucas and then at Jenna, who stood quietly in the corner, watching with her arms folded. Lucas shot her a look that said, "Go ahead, tell him," and she stepped forward, explaining in clear, simple terms what she had done, from the adjusted standing frame to the music she'd played to encourage rhythm, to how she had watched for signs of strain and stopped the session as soon as the girl's body started trembling too hard. There was no drama in her account, no claim of miracles, just the facts. The doctor listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, then he sighed. "Medically," he said slowly, "we have always talked about their injuries in terms of what is unlikely. But unlikely is not the same as impossible." He turned to Lucas. "I did not want to push you toward any path that would cause more pain if it failed," he admitted. "Parents in your situation often latch onto dangerous cures, strange clinics, false promises. But what your nanny is describing is not that. It is intense, creative physical therapy. Carries risks, yes, strains, falls, but also potential gains. Their bodies are still young. Neural pathways can sometimes wake up in small ways, and those small ways can matter for their independence and quality of life." He smiled faintly at the girls, who were now proudly wiggling their toes on command, like they'd just discovered a secret party trick. "We must still be careful. We must still be honest about limits. But I would be lying if I said I am not intrigued by what I saw on these tests." The word "intrigued" from this careful man landed in Lucas's chest like a small spark in dry wood. He looked at Jenna, who had gone very still, as if she was afraid to breathe too loudly and scare the possibility away. "So what do we do?" he asked quietly. The doctor folded his arms. "We build a plan," he said. "A proper one this time. We schedule more frequent supervised sessions. We teach Jenna and any other caregiver exactly how to support them. We monitor their nerves with new scans. We set realistic goals, maybe standing for longer, maybe transferring with less help. And we agree that whatever happens, we frame this for the girls not as, if you don't walk, you failed, but as, your body is learning new tricks and every trick counts." It was perhaps the most cautious hope Lucas had ever heard, but it was hope all the same. Over the next week, the house shifted around this new plan. The therapy room became the center of their days, a place of sweat and laughter and sometimes tears. Parallel bars were installed, harnesses adjusted, mats replaced. Jenna was a constant presence there, her patience stretched but never snapping, her encouragement steady. The girls had good days when their legs responded with surprising strength and bad days when everything felt heavy and stubborn and they burst into frustrated tears, asking why their bodies could not just work like other kids did. On those days, Lucas watched from the doorway, his phone forgotten in his pocket, as Jenna knelt beside them and said, "It's okay to be mad. It's okay to rest. We'll try again when you're ready," and he felt both grateful and a little ashamed that he had not always known how to say those things himself. But not everyone in his world saw this new chapter as something beautiful. One afternoon, while he was in a video conference with board members from one of his companies, his assistant messaged him with a news link and a line that made his stomach drop. "You should see this before the others do." He clicked and his blood ran cold. A gossip site had posted a story with a grainy, zoomed-in still from an old camera feed, one of the early days after he'd installed the CCTV, showing a nanny wiping food from one twin's face while the other sat in her wheelchair with a visible strap across her lap. The headline screamed about a cold billionaire spying on his paralyzed kids 24/7, and raising them under constant surveillance. The article implied that his security measures were a sign of obsession, that his cameras were more about control than care. The picture was old, pulled from a leak he had not even known existed, but it did not matter. The story was already spreading, people in the comments arguing about whether he was a monster or just a scared father, others using it to attack his business decisions. He felt sick. All at once, his cameras did not feel like lifelines. They felt like open windows anyone could peer through. He thought of how Jenna had unplugged the playroom feed, of how he'd snapped at her for it, and now, staring at this violation of his family's privacy plastered online, her choice looked different. When the video call resumed, he could tell some of the board members had seen the story too by the way they glanced at him, eyes full of a mix of curiosity and judgment they tried to hide. That evening, as he paced the living room with his phone in his hand, angry calls coming in from his PR team and lawyers, Jenna stepped in, drawn by the frantic tone. "Is it about the cameras?" she asked quietly, and he realized then that the news had already reached the staff. Everyone in the house moved differently that day, like the walls themselves had lost their sense of safety. "Someone leaked old footage," he said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "People who don't know anything about us are using a picture of my girls to tell a story they like better." Jenna's jaw tightened. "This is why I hate cameras around kids," she murmured. "They freeze moments without context. They show straps but not the reason those straps keep them safe. They show wheelchairs but not the courage it takes to learn to use them." He stared at her. "You think I should tear them all down?" he asked, the question snapping out of him half in challenge, half in desperate curiosity. He had lived for years with the comfort those little blinking lights gave him when he was far away. The idea of losing them felt like walking into a dark forest with no flashlight. But the idea of strangers stealing images of his daughters felt worse. Jenna's eyes softened. "I think you should decide if you want to live more through screens or through doorways," she said gently. "Cameras can be useful. They can also become a way to watch life instead of live it. But this isn't just about you. It's about what makes your girls feel safe. Have you ever asked them how they feel about the cameras?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. No, he had not. He had just assumed. That night, he sat on the edge of his daughter's beds and did something he should have done long ago. He asked, "Do you like the little cameras in the corners?" he said, pointing to the tiny device near the ceiling. The twins exchanged a look, one of their wordless twin conversations. "Sometimes," Lily said slowly, "when you're gone, I like to think you can see us." Zoe nodded. "But sometimes it makes me feel like a show," she added. "Like if I fall, someone far away will see and be sad, so I don't want to try hard things." The simple honesty of that cut deeper than any news article. He kissed their foreheads and said, "Thank you for telling me. I'll think about what to do." The next morning he did something that shocked his security team, his PR people, and even himself. He ordered most of the cameras in the private upstairs areas taken down. The ones by the gates, the front door, and the outside stays. Safety was still non-negotiable. But the playroom, the bedrooms, the therapy room, they became camera-free zones. "We'll trust the people in those rooms," he said. "And I'll show up in person more instead of watching on a screen." As the technicians unscrewed devices from the walls, the house seemed to exhale. The twins watched from their wheelchairs, eyes wide, as the little machines were carried out. "No more blinking dots," Zoe whispered, and for the first time when she rolled into the playroom that afternoon, she did not glance up at the corner. She looked straight at Jenna, then at the parallel bars and said, "Let's see if my legs want to talk again." Of course, removing the cameras did not remove all the tension. Some staff members, especially those who had liked being able to show they followed every rule on tape, felt exposed, as if now every mistake would rely on someone's word instead of a recording. The outside world still buzzed about the leaked photo for a while, some pundits calling him a paranoid billionaire, others defending him. But inside the house, something fundamental was changing. The girls were beginning to feel like the main characters in their story again, not just patients in a monitored ward. And Lucas, forced by his own choices to be present, began to rearrange his life around their therapy sessions instead of squeezing them into his schedule. The twist he did not expect came one late afternoon when the doorbell rang and the housekeeper hurried in with a message. "There is a woman at the gate," she said. "She says she used to work at the rehab center with Jenna. She insists on speaking with you. Says it's about your daughters and about boundaries." The word made his stomach drop. After the camera scandal, the last thing he needed was more trouble. But something about the housekeeper's worried eyes made him nod. "Bring her to the side sitting room," he said, curiosity and dread mixing in his veins. When he walked in a few minutes later, he found a tired-looking woman in her 40s sitting on the edge of the couch, wearing a faded cardigan and clutching a folder of papers. "I'm sorry to come uninvited," she said as soon as he introduced himself, twisting the strap of her bag. "My name is Carla. I was a nurse at the rehab center where Jenna volunteered. I heard she was working for you now. I thought you should know." She hesitated, then blurted it out. "She cares deeply about kids like your daughters. Maybe too deeply. She has a habit of pushing them, and herself, past safe limits. One boy she worked with got hurt trying an exercise she set up on her own. His parents were furious. They threatened to sue the center. She left before it went to court. I'm not saying she's bad," Carla added quickly, seeing the shock on his face. "She's kind. She's brave. But she has a complicated relationship with risk. I thought, given who you are, you would want all the information." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Images flashed through his mind. Jenna catching his girls before they fell, Jenna unplugging the camera, Jenna telling him about her brother. Was there some reckless streak in her that could end up harming the very children she wanted to help? Or was this woman's version of events missing pieces, shaped by fear and liability? He asked questions, careful ones, listening to details about the boy at the rehab center, how he had made some gains, how he had also strained a muscle during one of the homemade exercises, how the parents, already fragile with worry, had lashed out at the easiest target. There was no clear villain in the story, just pain and caution and clashing ideas of what too far meant. After Carla left, leaving the folder of old incident reports on his desk, Lucas sat there long after the sun went down, the house quiet around him. On one side of the scale, he had his daughter's sparkling eyes when they talked about their talking legs, their tiny but real progress, their trust in Jenna. On the other side, he now had proof that Jenna sometimes pushed beyond what institutions were comfortable with. Was that heroism or danger? Or some messy mix of both? He knew one thing for sure. He could not blindly hand over his children's future to anyone, no matter how kind their eyes were. But he also knew that the safest possible life, the one with no risks, no falls, no homemade standing frames, might be the one that kept his girls locked in chairs forever when they might have been able to do a little more. That night, as he stood outside the girls' room watching them sleep, he felt the weight of a decision pressing down on him heavier than any boardroom vote. In the faint glow of the nightlight, he could see their legs under the blankets, still and small, but in his mind he saw them like they had been in the therapy room, toes pressing into the mat, knees shaking with effort. He knew the next day he would have to confront Jenna with what he'd learned. He would have to decide how far he was willing to let her lead this strange, hopeful battle for inches of movement. He would have to choose between protecting them from every possible harm and giving them a chance at a different kind of life. And as he turned away from their door, heart tight, he knew that whatever choice he made would not only change their bodies' stories, but also his own, because for the first time in years, the billionaire who had built walls of glass and cameras around his pain was standing at the edge of something he could not control with money, and the next step might cost him more than any deal he had ever signed. In the morning light, the house looked almost peaceful, as if nothing had shifted in its bones, but Lucas woke with the weight of the night before pressing on his chest, the folder from Carla still on his desk, the memory of his daughter's shaking legs and Jenna's steady hands playing on a loop in his mind, and he knew he could not delay the next conversation. There was too much at stake now to drift along on half-trust and secrets, so after breakfast, when the twins were happily distracted in the kitchen making fruit faces on their pancakes with the housekeeper, he sent a quiet message for Jenna to meet him in the smaller sitting room that looked out over the garden, a room Megan had once loved because of the soft morning sun that pooled on the floor like honey. When Jenna walked in, she looked alert but calm, her usual gray t-shirt and black pants making her blend into the room in a way that almost made him forget just how much of an earthquake she had become in their lives. She shut the door behind her and stood waiting, fingers laced loosely in front of her, eyes steady. He did not circle around it. He picked up the folder from the coffee table, holding it between them like a piece of evidence. "A nurse from the rehab center came to see me," he said, watching her face. He saw the flicker of recognition, then worry, then something else he couldn't name. "She brought reports. Told me about a boy who got hurt during an exercise you set up. Told me you left before his parents tried to sue." For a heartbeat, Jenna went very still, like someone hearing thunder from far away, then she let out a long breath and sat down slowly on the edge of the opposite chair without being invited, the way people do when their legs suddenly feel too weak to hold them. "So that's followed me here," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Then she lifted her gaze. "What did she say happened?" He flipped the folder open, skimming the lines he had already read 10 times. Unsanctioned exercise, minor muscle tear, emotional parents, potential legal action. "She said you care deeply but push too far," he answered bluntly. "That you sometimes ignore limits. That a child got hurt because you thought you knew better than the program." He did not add the quiet question that had kept him awake. "Is that what you're doing with my girls?" He didn't have to. It hung in the air between them. Jenna did not rush to defend herself with excuses. Instead, she rubbed her palms on her knees as if grounding herself, then spoke slowly, choosing each word with care, her voice low. "The boy's name was Caden," she began. "He was 9. He had been told for years that his legs were dead, but his toes twitched when he was angry, his thighs tensed when he sat up. I saw it when others didn't, or maybe they saw it and were too scared to attach meaning to it. One afternoon, after his formal session, he asked if we could try something he'd seen on a video. Kids using bands and chairs to stand a little taller, to feel weight through their feet. I checked the chart, I checked his pressure points, I weighed the risks, and I said yes. We built a crude setup with what we had. I supported his weight." He stood for almost 30 seconds. He cried from joy. I cried. But the next day his calf was sore, and he limped more in his chair transfers. His parents were terrified. They blamed me. The center blamed me too because no one wanted to admit their program had never given him what one improvised session had. I took the blame because it was easier than arguing with people who were already so afraid. I left because they made it clear that my way of seeing kids, full of possibility even inside their limits, made them nervous. She paused, eyes shiny now but not spilling over. I learned from that, Mr. Carter. I learned to document better, to involve parents more, to talk to doctors instead of assuming they'd say no. But I did not learn to stop believing that bodies can surprise us. The room felt smaller now, filled with her story and his doubts and the invisible presence of every child who had ever been told never by someone in a white coat. He thought of the article online calling him cold, thought of the tiny tremor in his daughter's legs, thought of how easy it would be to slam the door on all of this, fire her, go back to safe routines and controlled sadness. Do you think you did the right thing with that boy? He asked, his voice quieter, more searching than accusing now. Jenna swallowed. I think I did my best with the information and resources I had, she said truthfully. If I had had your money, your equipment, your team, I would have done it differently. But I would still have tried, because the look on his face when he felt the floor under both feet for the first time in years. I would take 1,000 angry meetings for that moment. People see risk in lawsuits. I see a child who now knows his body isn't just a chair. She looked straight at him. And with your daughters, I am not acting alone in a back room of an underfunded center. I'm in your house, with your doctor, with your security. I unplugged one camera once because they needed one private moment. I won't do that again. But I will not apologize for believing in them. He studied her for a long time, his mind working in its old business patterns, assessing risk, weighing upside, trying to decide if she was an asset or a liability. But this wasn't a merger or a startup, it was his family, and the tidy pros and cons list he kept wanting to make kept getting smudged by images that didn't fit in columns. His daughter's joyful shouts, Jenna on her knees catching them, the doctor saying, "Unlikely is not impossible," the sour taste of that leaked CCTV still on the gossip site. Finally he set the folder down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, shoulders heavy. "If I fire you," he said slowly, "I go back to safe routines. We follow the plan, we protect them from every fall, they stay where they are or get a little stronger in their chairs, and I never have to lie awake wondering if my nanny is pushing too far. But I will also have to live with knowing that the first time I saw my daughters stand, I reacted with fear and punishment instead of leaning in. If I keep you, I risk more scares, more spasms, maybe more angry doctors, maybe more headlines if anything looks wrong. And yet, I also give them a chance at something more, even if that more is only being able to stand and hug someone someday instead of being lifted." He sighed, the sound rough. "I don't know which version of regret I'm more afraid of." Jenna's voice softened. "There is one thing I can promise," she said. "I will not gamble with them to prove I'm right. I will not chase miracles for my ego. If at any point the doctor says, this is harming them more than helping, I will be the first to stop. And if you decide today that having me here is too much for your heart, I will pack my things and go without dragging your name anywhere. I'm not here for a big story. I'm here because two little girls looked at me like I was someone who could see them as more than their chairs, and I couldn't walk away from that." There was no drama in her words, just tired, stubborn honesty. For a man who had spent years around people who twisted truths to suit their goals, it disarmed him more than any polished speech could have. The decision, when it finally formed in his chest, surprised even him with its clarity. "We keep going," he said quietly. "But not like this. Not on secret experiments and unplugged cameras and surprise visits from people with old reports. We do it together. With a written plan. With a doctor. With my eyes open, not glued to a screen from another country. You don't move them into a new exercise without telling me and the therapist. You don't let them try a new device alone. And if they ever look more afraid than excited, we stop and we reevaluate. Do you agree?" Jenna nodded at every sentence, tears finally spilling over now, not from fear but from a strange, relieved joy. "I agree," she whispered. "Thank you for not shutting the door." He shook his head. "Don't thank me yet," he muttered. "I am still terrified." She smiled faintly. "Me too," she said. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do while your hands are still shaking." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a message from his head of security. "We found the leak," it read. "You'll want to hear this in person." For a second, he considered ignoring it. All his emotional energy was already stretched thin. But then he thought of his girls' faces blown up on some stranger's screen, the way the world had taken one image and turned it into a story about a monster father, and he knew he owed them the truth about that too. He excused himself from Jenna and headed toward the security office, a small room tucked behind the kitchen where walls of monitors and screens still watched the outside gates and the long driveway. Grant, calm as ever, was waiting with a tight jaw and a printout in his hand. "It wasn't a hacker," he said without ceremony. "It was an old employee. A housekeeper who left 2 years ago. She had copied some of the early CCTV backups onto a flash drive before the system was updated. She sold the clip to a gossip freelancer when she ran into money trouble. We traced the payment. We have proof. The betrayal hit Lucas like a slap. He remembered the woman's face now, the way she used to hum while folding the girl's clothes, the way she'd cried when she left to help her sister in another state. Is she in trouble? He asked, his voice tight. Legally she could be, Grant said. We can press charges for theft and breach of privacy. The lawyers are already drafting letters. But given your profile, any court case will drag this story out for months. He hesitated, then added, there's something else. She wrote a long email to the blogger after the video went viral. We got a copy. She said she regretted selling it when she saw the comments. Said she never meant to hurt the girls. She thought people would see how much care they had. She was wrong. The mix of selfishness and remorse in that picture made Lucas feel oddly tired. He could crush her if he wanted, use his army of lawyers to make an example out of her. He could also quietly shut it down. Neither option would erase the fact that images of his daughters existed on servers he did not control. In the end, he chose the path that made the most sense for the two people who mattered most. Send her a firm letter, he said. Make it clear we know. Make it clear that if she ever uses another image, we will push every legal button we have. But don't drag my girls through a trial. I won't give the internet more chances to feed off them. He paused, then added something that surprised even him. Offer her help with a real job if she needs it. Through one of the foundations. Anonymous. No more selling secrets. Grant's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. As Lucas left the room, he realized that this was another way his heart was changing. The man who had once believed control and punishment were the only ways to keep safe was slowly learning that sometimes mercy protected more than revenge did. The months that followed did not look like a straight line upward. They were messy, full of progress and setbacks and ordinary days that would never make a headline. Under the doctor's guidance, Jenna and a small team of therapists built a program that honored both the twins' medical realities and their wild little spirits. Some days, the girls stood in their frame and managed to hold themselves for a full minute, faces flushed with pride, their hands gripping the bar so hard their knuckles turned white. Other days, their legs refused to cooperate, spastic and stubborn, and they ended sessions early, leaning back in their chairs with tears on their cheeks, whispering, "It's not fair." On those days, Lucas's chest ached so badly he wanted to call the whole thing off, to wrap them in blankets and tell them never to try again so they would never feel that particular pain. One evening, after a particularly rough session in which both girls had burst into frustrated sobs and yelled at the entire world, he found himself pacing the balcony outside the therapy room, his hands gripping the railing so hard his fingers hurt. Jenna came out quietly, shutting the door behind her, her own face pale from the emotional storm. "We can stop," he blurted, the words tumbling out before he could dress them up. "We can tell them the doctor said this is enough. We can go back to focusing on their arms, their independence in the chair. This is too hard on them. On us." He sounded like a man begging to be released from a promise. Jenna didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly before holding it out to him. On the screen was a short video she'd filmed with his permission a few weeks earlier, one he had been too busy to watch in full. It showed Lily gripping the parallel bar, cheeks shining, looking straight into the camera. "If I get scared and say I want to stop, show me this," Past Lily said in her small, serious voice. "Remind me that I said I would rather fall while trying to stand and sit forever and wonder what my legs could do." Zoe, beside her, nodded with a brave little smile in the clip. "Me too," she said. "If I cry, it doesn't mean I quit. It means my feelings fell down, not my legs." Watching their own words, their own tiny courage echo back at him from the screen, something inside Lucas cracked in a way that was both painful and freeing. He laughed once, a short sound that turned into a choked sob, then wiped at his eyes with the heel of his hand. "They are stronger than I am," he said hoarsely. "Half the time, yes," Jenna replied gently. "That's why they need you to be the one who remembers this on the days they forget. Just like they will remind you on the days you want to hide behind cameras and meetings again." That night, when he tucked them into bed, he did not say, "We can stop if this is too hard." Instead, he said, "Today was a bad day. Bad days are allowed. Tomorrow we try again, and if tomorrow is bad too, we rest and try another tomorrow after that." Lily, already half asleep, murmured, "Daddy, did you see when my knee didn't give up right away?" And he realized she was remembering not the fall, but the seconds before it. He kissed her forehead and said, "I did. I'm proud of every second." Outside their little circle, the world did what it always does. It moved on to other stories. The leaked CCTV still disappeared under new scandals and gossip. But one afternoon, months later, the world would circle back to the Carters in a very different way. It started with a simple choice. The twins' therapist suggested shooting a short video for a medical conference about creative pediatric rehab, showing how kids could find joy in hard exercises. "We'll keep it anonymous," he promised. "No faces, just legs and equipment. It might give other parents ideas." Lucas surprised himself by saying no, and then adding, "If we ever share, it will be on our terms, with their faces, their names, their voices. They're not a case study. They're storytellers." That thought sat in his mind like a seed. One Saturday he sat the girls down and asked them a question. "If other kids out there have legs that get tired like yours, would you want them to see you trying so they don't feel alone?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But only if we get to say the words, 'not you.'" Zoe nodded. "And no sad music," she added. "Happy music. This is hard, not sad." So they filmed, not with hidden cameras but with his phone in his own hands. Short clips. The twins laughing as they rolled into the therapy room, Jenna high-fiving them, little feet pushing against the mat, a close-up of hands gripping bars, then a cut to them flopped on the couch afterward, hair sweaty, cheeks red, eating popsicles like tiny champions. In between, they spoke to the camera in their own language. "Hi, I'm Lily," one said. "My legs got hurt in a car crash. The doctor said I might not walk. They were not being mean, they were just scared for me. But my legs still talk to me sometimes, so I talk back with exercises." The other chimed in, "Sometimes I fall. Sometimes I cry. But my daddy says strong people can cry and try at the same time." When they were done, Lucas edited the clips late at night, sitting alone in his office, tears falling onto his hands as he listened to his daughters sound braver than most adults he knew. He didn't add a logo or a company tagline. At the end, he simply put text on the screen that said, "Your worst day doesn't get to write your whole story." He posted it from a personal account instead of a corporate one, without press releases or spin, his finger hovering over the button for a long second before he tapped share. He expected a few friends and maybe some families from their hospital days to see it. He did not expect it to spread the way it did. Within days, almost everyone had forgotten the old grainy clip of a nanny wiping food off a child's face. Instead, they were sharing two little girls grinning through sweat, a father kneeling beside parallel bars, a young woman in a gray t-shirt cheering in the background. Parents of kids in wheelchairs wrote in the comments from all over the world, saying, "My child watched this 3 times and said, 'That girl's legs talk like mine,' or 'Thank you for not making disability look like a tragedy.'" Of course, there were still cruel trolls, there always are, but their voices were drowned out by a tide of people who saw what Lucas finally saw clearly. His daughters were not broken stories, they were powerful ones. The biggest surprise came almost a year after the night he'd first seen them stand on that tiny screen in a faraway hotel. It was a quiet Sunday, the anniversary of Megan's death, a date that had always sat heavy on his heart like a stone. In the past, he had tried to outrun the day with work or long drives. This year, at the twins' request, they planned something different. A remember day in the garden with balloons and blue ribbons because that had been Megan's favorite color, and a small tree planted in her honor. "Mommy loved trees," Lily had said earnestly. "They grow slow but they do not give up." It was Jenna's idea to make the garden path smoother and to set up a small bench near the new tree so the girls could roll their chairs up easily. They spent the morning drawing pictures of Megan, telling funny stories about how she used to burn toast but made the best silly songs. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, the housekeeper came to get Lucas, saying the girls wanted him in the playroom before they went outside. He walked in, expecting to see art supplies or maybe a video call with one of Megan's old friends. Instead, the room was oddly tidy, the wheelchairs parked neatly against one wall, the parallel bars pushed back. Jenna stood near the couch, her hands clasped, eyes sparkling with a mixture of nerves and excitement. "Close your eyes," she said softly. "And no peeking until I say." Everything in him wanted to refuse. He was not a man who liked surprises anymore. But there was trust in her voice and something mischievous that sounded very much like his daughter's, so he did it. He closed his eyes. He heard a soft shuffle, a whisper, a tiny giggle. "Okay," Jenna finally said, voice shaking. "Open." He did, and the world shifted. There, in the middle of the room, between the couch and the open doorway, his daughters stood. Not strapped into a frame. Not clinging to a bar. Each had a small, carefully fitted walker in front of her, light metal frames with little wheels, and harness belts that looped gently around their hips for support, but most of the work was theirs. Their hands gripped the handles, knuckles white, arms trembling, knees bent. Their faces were set with focus and lit with joy. Slowly, one at a time, they moved a foot, heel then toe. One step, then another. The distance between them and him was not a mile. It was only a few small paces across the mat. But to him, it looked like the length of the universe. He could not move at first. Emotion slammed into him so hard his legs went weak, and he had to grab the back of the chair for balance. He watched as Lily bit her lip and pushed her walker forward as Zoe whispered, 1212, under her breath. They wobbled, they paused, they shifted. Jenna hovered behind them, hands out but not touching unless they started to tip too far. He realized with a strange, sharp ache that this was not their first time doing this. They had been practicing, planning, waiting for this exact moment. When they reached him, when two pairs of small feet finally stopped in front of his shoes and his daughters, breathing hard, let go of their walkers with one hand each to grab his fingers, something inside him finally broke open in a way that felt not like shattering but like a dam giving way. He dropped to his knees, arms wrapping around both of them, and sobbed into their hair, their laughter and tears mixing with his. Happy Remember Day, Daddy, Zoe gasped between breaths. We wanted to stand for Mommy. Lily nodded, her chin wobbling. We can't walk far yet, she said, always the honest one. But we can stand and walk a little. For her. For us. For you. He laughed through his tears, pulling them even closer, feeling their legs pressed against his own. Somewhere behind him, he heard Jenna sniff and turn away, giving them privacy. There was no camera in the corner to record this, no blinking red light, no app in another country. This time the only thing capturing the moment was his own heart and the hearts of the three people in the room. For the first time since the accident, he did not wish there was a device to replay it. He knew he would never forget. Later, when they all stood, or sat in the girl's case, after their legs had given all they could for the day, around the little tree in the garden, tying blue ribbons on its branches, Lucas spoke aloud words he had carried silently for years. He talked to Megan, not in a hospital chapel this time, but in the open air, with sunlight on his face and his daughters on either side. I promised you I would protect them, he said quietly. I thought that meant never letting them risk more pain. I thought that meant cameras and walls and saying no to anything that scared me. But I was wrong. Protecting them also means letting them try, letting them fall a little, letting other people help them in ways I can't. I wish you could see them today. They stood Meg. They walked to me. Not because of any miracle I bought, but because of stubborn little hearts and a nanny who annoyed me into hope. The girls giggled at that and he smiled, wiping at his eyes. As the tree's leaves rustled in the breeze, he felt something heavy lift from his shoulders. The guilt he had carried for being in another country when the call came, the shame for installing cameras instead of talking to his daughters about their fears, the anger at the driver who had changed their lives in one drunk second. It all loosened its grip a little. He wasn't naive. He knew there would still be hard days ahead, new surgeries, teenage frustrations, moments when the world would be cruel or buildings would not have ramps. But he also knew now that his worst day, the rainy night that took his wife and broke his girls' spines, did not have the right to be the last word. Their story was still being written every time their toes curled on the mat or their hands pushed a wheel or their walkers rolled 1 inch forward. That night, when the girls were in bed and the house was quiet, he stood in the darkened playroom alone for a moment, listening to the hum of the house. His gaze drifted to the corner where the playroom camera had once been, that empty space on the ceiling like a healed scar. He walked under it, then sat on the couch, letting the memories wash over him, the black screen in a hotel room, the panic, the anger, the first glimpse of them standing, the argument with Jenna, the plan, the slow progress, the betrayal and the mercy, the surprise walk. If someone had told him 3 years ago that he would willingly strip away his favorite layer of control and replace it with trust, he would have laughed. Yet here he was, sitting in a room that no longer broadcast his daughter's every movement, and he had never felt more connected to them. He pulled out his phone, not to open the camera app now, but to write a few lines for the channel where he had shared their earlier video. His fingers moved slowly over the screen as he typed. I installed cameras because I was terrified of losing what was left of my family. I thought watching every second would keep them safe. It took a stranger, a brave nanny, to show me that some miracles only happen when you're willing to turn the cameras off and step into the room yourself. My daughters are not cured. They still use their chairs. They still have hard days. But they took steps we were told they never would. Those steps began the moment we chose hope over fear, process over perfection, presence over control. If you're watching this and you're living through your worst day, I can't promise an ending like ours. But I can tell you this. Your story is bigger than one diagnosis, one accident, one mistake. You are more than the footage of your failure. Don't let fear install cameras in your heart that stop you from trying again. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, a line his daughters had insisted on. P.S. Strong people can cry and try at the same time. As always, before he turned off the lights and went to bed, he stopped by the twins' room, standing in the doorway for a moment to listen to their soft breaths. Jenna's brother had visited once, weeks earlier, rolling into the house in his own chair, then standing slowly with his walker to let the girls see another version of a future that was neither all chair nor all running, but something beautifully in between. The girls had cheered for him like he was a superhero, and he had laughed, saying, "I just walk weird. That's my superpower." Moments like that, quiet and real, meant more to Lucas now than any plaque in his office. He knew one day his daughters would grow old enough to fully understand the choices he had made, the cameras, the fear, the change, the risk of keeping Jenna, and they would have their own opinions about them. He hoped, more than anything, that when that day came, they would see not a perfect father, but one who had learned, one who had chosen to keep trying even when he was scared, just like them. We'll end the story here, at a place where the miracle isn't that everything is fixed, but that a broken family has learned to live, love, and hope again in a new way, where a billionaire who once trusted screens more than people now stands in a therapy room catching his daughters when they stumble, and where a nanny's stubborn belief in sleepy legs helped wake up more than muscles. It woke up a father's heart. If you're still here listening to this, I want you to do 3 things for me. First, hit the like button so this story can reach more people who need a little hope today. Second, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which moment in this story touched you the most. And third, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth so we can keep bringing you more powerful, life-changing stories like this one.